Welcome to Pro Audio Perspectives. I'm Brendan Decora, and on the show, we'll dive into the heart and soul of the music industry. I enjoy candid conversations with professionals from across the pro audio field. In each episode, we explore the emotional connections and the artistry behind the music, going beyond the technical aspects to uncover what truly inspires great performances. Thanks for joining me. Enjoy. On today's show, we have Travis Ference. He's an engineer and mixer who has credits with Taylor Swift, Imagine Dragons, Bush, and Skylar Grey. Check it out. First and foremost, thank you so much for being here on the show. I really appreciate it. Awesome. I'd like to start if you want to go over your backstory, kind of how you got to where you are, what led you to engineering in the first place, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, what's an interesting way to tell the story? So I got into playing guitar when it was like middle school, and somewhere in high school bought it was a Korg D1600, like digital recorder.
Yeah.
Recorded myself and found out that I kind of sucked. So I was like, okay, well, what if my friend's better than me? I'll record him.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got the recording bug. But I was like, no clue what was going on to the point where, I was using Sony Acid. Do you remember Sony?
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Had all these like loop CDs that are probably like in a drawer here. And I was like, I want to get the stuff in the Korg into the computer, so I'm going to get a MIDI cable. And I mean, obviously now we know that that's not how that works, right? But I was an idiot. So anyway, I would record my friends, and we had a good time. We'd print CDs and try to sell them at school. And then probably would have stopped there. That probably would have been the end for me.
Yeah.
I was playing sports in high school as a lacrosse player.
Okay.
And was really wanted to play lacrosse in college. And so that was like kind of a priority. And then I got hurt, missed like a whole season and spent that whole season recording my buddy. Okay. And then I was like, that's it. Fuck yeah, let's do this. Right. And so I ended up going to music school for that, moving to LA.
Nice.
And so from like 17, I knew recording engineer. That's what I want to do. And then once I figured out that mixing was a gig, it was, I want to mix.
Right.
So that's how I got sucked into this. Ended up in this town.
Nice. Yeah. So what did you do when you first landed in LA? Where did you work?
Well, it was 2006. I don't know when you came here, but it was definitely like you weren't getting a job unless you were here. So you sent a lot of emails, right? Yes. And you're like, I'm moving there next week. And they're just like, call us when you're here.
Right.
And so I ended up having an in at Capitol Studios through a friend's dad who was an engineer. And he said, before you hit up everybody in town, try to get in touch with Paula and see if you can chat. And so I sent an email, subject line, Elliot Shiner told me to contact you.
Right. Nice.
And that got a response.
Yeah.
And so I started there maybe like 3 or 4 weeks after I got to LA. It wasn't like, they still made me wait it out, And I was doing less than 10 hours a week. I was like the ultimate extra filling guy. And slowly worked my way up. Ended up, they were like, we want to give you more hours. We like you. Our desk guy's leaving. If you do half the week on the desk, we'll give you more studio shifts. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. So I was answering the phones. So you learn how to deal with clients and meet everybody, be cordial on the phone and stuff. And then slowly made my way to full-time running. There, the glorious entry-level studio gig.
Yeah.
And
how you made your way to the glorious entry level. It wasn't even the beginning.
After 6 months in LA, having no money, I made my way to the just over minimum wage gig, which was great because Capitol paid more than minimum wage.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So all my friends at Village and Henson were like, "You're making what?"
Right.
I'm like, "Yeah, man, $10."
Awesome.
But or maybe it was $9, whatever it was. Yeah. But so that's how I ended up here with a job in a studio and worked at Capitol twice I quit once. I guess I quit twice.
Yeah. Nice.
But I love that place.
Awesome. So nowadays, are you doing more mixing, production, engineering?
Mainly just mixing. It was something that, like I mentioned, I really wanted to navigate to the mixing chair. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've experienced this because you've been out here working for a while. Mm-hmm. When you're sitting in the engineering chair, especially where I was, which was doing a lot of pop vocal sessions and stuff like that, you're the engineer, and it doesn't matter like what you do that day, how great the rough mix sounds.
Right.
Ultimately, somebody's like, I can't wait to hear this mixed, or they ask you, do you mix? And I'm like, we've been mixing for 2 hours.
Yeah.
You're just this is the rough mix of the demo, so you don't believe that like I'm a mixer.
Yeah.
And so during it was during the pandemic where I was really thinking about trying to do less engineering. Mm-hmm. And then the fact that nobody was doing anything in 2020, kind of that was like my hard stop. I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm going to engineer for the people I love or the opportunities that I can't pass up.
Right.
But like, I'm not going to do these songwriting sessions. I'm not going to do these vocal sessions as much as I love recording vocals. I've recorded a lot of vocals. So, and so now, I just walk in the backyard here and mix.
Yeah.
So it's
awesome. Nice.
It's good.
Nice.
It's good.
Awesome. I mean, one of the things I like to talk about a lot on the show is kind of how to inspire artists in the studio. And as mixers, it's different because you come to a project with a new perspective and you kind of, can help show them the potential of what it can be.
Yes.
So how do you approach when you're first working with a new client? Like what process do you do to get that information about the vision out of them?
Now is different than before.
Okay.
And I think that like comes with experience. Mm-hmm. Now it's really get on the same page. Like I used to shy away from having a call or like doing a Zoom with a potential client. I don't know why. Mm-hmm. I think there was just like so much of remote mixing these days is like very transactional. Like you hit somebody up on their website, I email you, we go back and forth.
Right.
We like never actually speak.
Yes.
And it works, but I find that there's space for miscommunication.
Right.
And I also think that if you can have a conversation with somebody, you can get to the final product faster, understand what they're looking for, what they do or don't like about the current state of the project. And so that's the biggest difference for me, is trying to get upfront communication out of the way. Like back in the day, like 7 or 8 years ago, when I was less experienced, there's like I don't want to say an ego or like a pride thing, but like when you feel like you're getting mixes right, then you start to feel like, oh, I know what's better.
Right. And
so I'm going to change this in a way that the artist is going to think is better because it is better because I've decided that it's better.
Yeah.
and ultimately you bump some heads that way, and it's not polite.
And, better is subjective too. It's like
exactly. Yeah. So I mean, better might be the rough mix through my mix chain. Right. I mean, like it's sometimes I work for 8 hours just to find out that I need to go as far back towards the rough mix as I can, because when you flip back and forth as the mixer and you're like, there's like something shitty in this rough mix.
Right.
That is giving it what's cool. Now I need to I need to find that mud. Like, where can I put that energy that they have back into it?
Right.
So I think that's a mistake that people make is, but I also think it's part of your career as a mixer. Like you eventually have to have your ego and like put your stamp on things. Yeah. And then once you get past that, then you realize that it's a collaboration. Like if you want me to do basically nothing, that's fine. Let's talk about that and figure out what you want from me. And that's what I want to give you. And I think that's the thing that I focus on now.
Right. Exactly.
Is really supporting the artist in whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Can you describe a mix where you had to break the conventional rules to get it right?
To get it right.
I know, obviously, that's subjective, like we were just talking about.
Like I've broken some conventional rules. I did it. One of my favorite mixes. Hold on, let me think about this. Is there another situation that's maybe better? No, I love this mix.
Okay.
And now that you've asked me, I'm not going to remember the name of the song, so I'm going to
okay.
apologize in advance.
No, that's okay.
But it's an artist named Best Friend. Very like synth indie pop duo thing. Really like super talented, like on the up. Love working with them. But there was a mix that I did on their song's called Matador.
Okay.
I'm glad I remembered.
There you go.
There was a mix I did on their last record, and I was talking to a buddy, and he was talking about like all of the micro shift that he was putting on something. I completely misunderstood him. And I was like, you're putting fucking micro shift on the mix bus in parallel?
Wait, what?
So there wasn't a lot in this song. It was like guitar, vocal. I don't remember if there was a little bit of drum, but then it had this like epic moment at the end. And I really wanted to have that moment be exaggerated. Like it was already in the production kind of pumping and like sucking. And I wanted to take that to the next level. So I built this like hyper compressed subchain version of the mix that I was pushing up just in the end.
Right.
To just really make it suck extra hard. Suck in a good way.
Yes. For those that don't understand.
Yeah. And then I was like, well, fuck, I want it to be wider. I'm going to put the micro shift on it. So I put a micro shift on it and I made it like super bright and like took the low end out of it.
Right.
And so, I mean, this was a parallel mix bus and my computer at the time wasn't the M1 and it was like, you know, pushed to the limit. And it was cool. The end was so sick. And I was like, awesome. I'm just going to listen to this and see how it feels and just like, you know, hit return, jump back to stop, played it. And listened to it. I was like, man, this feels so cool. Oh my God, that mix bus is on. And that hyper compressed mix bus was still on, but the side chain wasn't triggering.
Okay.
So it was this like super bright, compressed, modulated thing that was going on in the background. And I muted it. And there's like this haze that was cool that disappeared. And I was like, you know what? This is fucking wrong. I'm going to print two versions. And I sent it to the artist and I was like, here's mix 1A, here's mix 1B.
Right.
I'm not going to tell you what I did, but just tell me what you like better.
Yeah.
I was like, it's like a feel thing.
Yeah.
And they were like, we love B. And I was like, all right, well, there's micro shift on the mix bus now. So that's probably like the weirdest thing I've ever done.
Right.
That worked,
Nice.
you know, and I've tried it again. It's never worked ever again.
Awesome. Just that one song.
That one time.
That's awesome.
But yeah.
So how do you manage the expectations of artists versus the realities of mixing?
I think that's really challenging, and I think it takes a lot of experience. And I feel like I've just started to understand how to have that conversation. And I mean, one thing that's a red flag for me is if an artist is like, "Can you make it sound like a hit?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, this is like what I'm going to do is not going to make it a hit or not make it a hit.
Right.
It'll make it sit next to a hit.
Yeah.
But paying me my full rate is not the difference between a less than 1,000 on Spotify and a 2.5 million.
Yes.
Okay. Like we need to go back to the beginning to understand what that difference is.
Right.
But the way that I describe my process to people is that I want to take their 100% and take it to like 150.
Right.
I want to like start from where they left off because there's something about that they like.
Right.
Unless they say that, you know, we didn't do anything. There's like that conversation.
Yeah.
But that's how I kind of describe what I do. It's like, I want to take every choice that you've made and emphasize it. I want to take your highs and make them higher, like in energy, not necessarily brightness. Yeah. And like your low moments, I want to make those more down and just kind of like multiply the emotion that you've already put in it.
Right.
And I feel like that description has translated really well to a lot of artists. Yeah. Because then that also immediately starts their response of, perfect, we love the rough mix, that's what we want. Or we like the rough mix, but like we wish it was like drying in your face and it's not. And then you're like, okay, so now we've just avoided a whole round of notes because you just confessed that you want less reverb.
Right.
Because I was going to take your reverb to 150%,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
So framing it like that for people, I have found has been really effective to make sure everybody is on the same page from the beginning.
Nice. And what's your strategy for dealing with a track that has too many elements competing for space?
Well, I don't do a lot of soloing. So I'm not afraid to filter something off or make it sound a little ridiculous if that is going to make it poke through the mix.
Right.
I'm not a muter. I don't like from the mixing chair. I know that there's a lot of people that will make mute decisions.
Yeah.
I don't feel like that's my responsibility.
Right.
Maybe I'll suggest it. I'm more likely to, which is essentially muting, but just vary something a little bit.
Right.
Like if there's two pads, one is giving me like the air that I want, and the other one is like muddying up the bass. I'm gonna leave the muddier pad in. I'm gonna filter out the low end. I'm gonna tuck it down a little bit, make sure the bass cuts through, and focus on that top one. But yeah, it is a delicate balance to find the clarity in a mix. But I guess I'm not afraid to do something, like I said, drastic to make a part fit.
Right.
Because the artist is never going to hear it soloed. So,
yeah.
If they like the mix, they like the mix.
Exactly. And how do you balance, the artist's original vision with still adding your own touch to it?
That's another hard one, because I think that rides that delicate balance of the ego thing that I was talking about. Like, so the way I've brought this up before, so if you've heard this, I apologize. I feel like there's 3 stages to a mix career. There's like the I don't know shit, and I'm trying to figure it out, and you just go crazy and you do a bunch of stuff.
Right.
That's how you learn how to do things. And you're working with artists that also have no clue how to make a record, but you know how to make the technical side, kind of. They know how to make the music, so they're like open for you to create doubles and like do all those things, right? So there's that stage. And then after you figure out like all the things that are possible, you're hopefully working with better artists that have better production. They don't want their stuff to change because they really love it now.
Yeah.
And so then you get like really sterile. And you're like, I just need to replicate the rough mix.
Right.
And then you do that for a while. And then eventually I think that people start to figure out like why they're coming to you. And you can start to free yourself a little bit. Like this isn't a great answer to the question. This is a bit of a jump around. But then that third stage of a mixed career, I think, is where you can respect the vision of the artist and put your sonic identity on it. So that's like my precursor to trying to answer the question while I try to figure out what I want to say. But I think for me, a big part of it is always referencing the rough mix pretty regularly throughout like the initial stages of the mix.
Right.
And like I said, I want to kind of like, if you have something distorted, I want to see if I can make it a better version of that.
Right.
And when you start to go back and forth, I like instinctively I make sonic choices because of what I like to hear. So that's my stamp that I'm bringing subconsciously.
Right.
And then if I go back and forth between that rough mix, like if the distortion that I am adding is not giving me the feeling that your rough mix is adding, then like that distortion's out. But maybe my bizarre microshift mix bus stays.
Right.
So I think that's how I kind of work around sonically making something appeal to me as a listener to my taste, and still respecting what they did, is to just really be cognizant of if there's anything about that rough mix that I'm enjoying more. Right. I need to figure out what that is and bring that into what I've done. And that's the only way I could probably answer that question.
Yeah,
because it's hard.
That makes sense. Yeah,
it's hard.
Yeah, you have to walk that line for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
And you kind of went over this question with your little precursor answer, but how has your mixing style evolved over your career?
Faster.
Right.
And I don't think that's like, I don't think it's necessarily like a skill thing, especially since I've had my daughter. There's just less time.
Right.
particularly when she was young, there was like an 8-hour day wasn't possible. Like, because, you know, you're just like, you're trying to help with this infant.
Yeah.
And so you would get an hour, you would get 2 hours. And so I think the biggest change that I've made in the last 4 or 5 years is to work on more songs for longer time, as opposed to sitting in the chair on one track all day.
Right.
And so I might work on 2, usually not 3. I might work on 2 songs in a day, if it's one of my mixed days, and do 2 to 4 hours, and then jump to another song, and then the next day come back fresh, or maybe, you know, or I'll do a recall on a third song that day. And that perspective really helps, I think, get Mix 1 to where it should be. And when I was less experienced, I was getting I had a lot of notes for myself.
Right.
Like, the artist would have notes after I sent them the first mix, and I would also have a lot of notes.
Right.
And I find that that's a bad situation to be in, because then you're both changing things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it made me realize that I wasn't done. So I was sending mixes out that I wasn't really done with. And now, the artist has less notes because I've kind of self-revised.
Right, right.
Also, the studio helped, you know, a good build and being able to listen. It eliminates like the frequency stuff of like, this is boomy or this is bright. Like, those don't happen anymore. Now it's like, turn this up, turn that down. But yeah, I generally don't have very many changes on my end for Mix 2. And so then it becomes about, you know, supporting the artist. And I don't I'm comfortable with Mix 1 being approved. I'm comfortable with Mix 2 being like, I don't need to make any more changes for myself.
Yeah.
So that's a big workflow thing. And I think ultimately you end up finishing mixes faster.
Right.
Because you get fried. You've worked on something for 10 hours, and then the last thing you do is probably a mistake. Yeah. And it's usually some kind of vocal resonance that you just ruin the entire vocal. And like the last 5 minutes before you go home, you're like, this is amazing. Yeah. And then the next day you come in, you're like, what the fuck?
Exactly.
So perspective in like shorter bursts, I've found to just be like really powerful.
Do you often like take breaks? You'll start a mix one day and then finish it up the next morning for that perspective, or?
Yeah. So my workflow now is so my life is a little different than most freelance engineers. I work 3 days a week, and my wife works for 3 days a week, and then we parent the other day, like instead of having a nanny. And so I work Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I'll work Monday on something. I might jump in while my daughter sleeps on Tuesday, have about an hour, and just put some touches on something, or I might wait until Wednesday, and then I'll review everything again. So usually what I do is send mixes out to clients on like Saturday.
Okay.
So then I have all week to bounce between 2 or 3 songs.
Right.
And then sometimes people have a deadline, and that doesn't work, and you got to do the full thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, whatever, it just takes a couple extra rounds of notes because it wasn't done. You know, they needed it the next day. Yeah. And they got, you know, 8 hours, but the fresh perspective is huge. I encourage everybody to give it a shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And do you often, I mean, now that you kind of built your space here, do you do car checks? Do you listen outside of here at all, or you just gotten used to it and kind of know what you're doing?
No, I do a lot of sorry if I was off mic. That's a lot of Apple AirPods, iPhone. You know, I use, I can't remember what it's called. It's a Rogue.
Oh, the
Amoeba
speaker thing, yeah.
Airfoil, which I think is an old one. Somebody was like, you just found Airfoil? I use that to send to my phone or my AirPods, so I'll check in here, which is great. Car test, we've had like a couple different cars in the last few years, and I just like, doesn't mean anything to me anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm also not driving. Right. So like we get a new car, and I'm not in the car for 30 minutes listening to music. So when I go in there and check a mix, I'm like, what is this? Right. I don't even listen to music in here. I listen to podcasts. Yeah. So yeah, car test is kind of gone. Not that I don't think it's important. It just, I think it would be a mistake for me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what's one piece of outdated mixing advice do you think needs revising?
I mean, I think this is a thing. I don't know if anybody says this. I also do pop, but like the kick snare mix is dead. Like like when the kick and the snare are just super cranked. Right. I don't. I think that's over. I don't. It's not a very good answer.
That's okay.
Because I guess if you're like in the rock world, maybe that's a horrible.
Yeah.
It's a horrible piece of advice. In the pop world, I mean, I definitely get more notes that are, can you turn the snare down a dB, than I do, can you turn the snare up a dB?
Right.
Which makes me feel that way.
Yeah.
Another outdated mix advice. I think that a lot of people hate on templates. Mm-hmm. Because they think that it's doing the mix for you, but I think that like a template should make you more creative.
Right.
It should, like my template has a ton of stuff in it, but it's just so I can work quickly in the beginning. Mm-hmm. It's not doing anything. It's not like I'm not loading it up on my console with my compressor set.
Right.
I do gain staging, but I think that the real, I don't know, I think just the prevalency of presets kind of have made people think that if you have a mix template or a master template that you're not doing any work.
Right.
But I think that's an incorrect perception. I think if you have a good template, you can do most of a mix in 45 minutes because everything is there and you just do your thing and you can be creative.
Yeah. Honestly, even with me, like with my template, like I have way too many effects in it, quite frankly, but I don't use half of them or more on every mix. Like there's no way I do everything on everything, Totally. So it's just the availability to get the busy work and the non-creative work out of the way. And so I can just focus and, get to it.
Yeah. So I dodged your question.
That's okay. Totally fine. And how do you keep up with the rapid pace of change in mixing technology and techniques? I see you have Atmos here. We have to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. A lot of mixed opinions about Atmos.
Yes.
I found, man, I have the urge to stay on top of like the newest, coolest plugins. Mm-hmm. And my tax accountant can confirm that. But I will say that a couple years ago, I decided that I would stop buying plugins looking for a solution. Like I would stop looking for this reverb that I'm trying to find or whatever. And so for a year, I only bought one plugin because it was in a mix.
Okay.
And it was a Waves.
Right.
So that means it was always on sale for $29. Yes. And I was like, okay, I'll have that. It makes my life easier. And I learned that you don't need to keep up with the newest, coolest stuff. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like I really love like the new Mixwave CA70, and they just did that Hazel Rig VLC channel. I find that the analog character of stuff that's come out in the last couple of years is just a lot more flavorful and deeper than it was like 5 or 6 years ago.
Right.
So it really is like you really have to walk a fine line of like finding pieces of new technology that really help you do a better job or that you like really love.
Right.
Versus just buying everything that seems cool because it was in, your Instagram feed 17 times.
Yes.
But, because every tool, you already have every tool.
Right.
It's just, are you comfortable with not having something cool and new?
Yeah. No, exactly.
So that's kind of my philosophy. But I fall victim to buying a lot of toys.
Right.
Software toys. You can see by the empty rack over here that there's no analog toys going on anymore. But yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. And so you sort of touched on this a little bit before, but I just wanted to loop back to it, is how do you decide when a mix is finally finished, when you send it off to the client for the first time?
I've talked about this with a couple friends of mine, not like on my podcast, just conversation. I don't know. It's like, it just feels good. I feel like I start to move more. I don't get distracted by things. Mm-hmm. I don't want to hit stop and change something when I listen to it.
Right.
But it's like really is a vibe thing. Like you listen down, did I enjoy the song? Or was like, is the vocal too loud? Is the kick drum too bright?
Right.
Then it's not done. But like once all those things are gone, then I feel like it's good. Also, I find that like popping in the AirPods on a run, and just run it down the street and listen to it a couple times. Yeah. I don't do that in the middle of my mix day. I do that in the morning when I work out.
Right.
But if it's fun to listen to, just like when I'm not in front of the computer, is another like, okay, this is cool. This can go out.
Yeah.
And then a technique that I've seen and adopted if I'm having a hard time with something is I plucked this one from producer Ference. He's Australian producer, super talented. And we just listen from top to bottom, no stopping. You know, it's like when you listen down with the band, they're like, whoa, 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 we got to turn the bass up. Right. Everybody gets a notepad. You hit play at the top, you play it down, you write down your notes. And then you've now listened to the entire song. So then you just you talk about your notes. Okay, we're going to do all 5 of these notes. You go to the note, you do the note. Go to the next note, you do the note. Back to the top of the song, play the whole thing down.
Right.
Don't stop it. Keep perspective, write it down.
Yeah.
And I find that's a great way to finish off something that you're just like, what's wrong with this? I can't put my finger on it.
Right.
Yeah. So
awesome. Oh, that's great. Looking to the future, what innovations in mixing are you most excited about?
I want to see AI do for my mixing process what it does for like my video editing for my podcast.
Right.
Like there's a lot of time saving and like technical bullshit that I don't want to do.
Right.
That people are able to get Premiere to do. And I would love to see Avid either, I don't know if it's a programming thing or if it's just nobody wants to make these tools.
Right.
But like, why am I still triggering samples out of something that we all know is going to spit samples out wrong?
Yeah.
And then I got to go through and move like 45 of them to be sample accurate. Like, can there not just be an AI that does that shit? Can there not be an AI that like, I don't want it to do my mix. I want it to do all of my prep and all of that like nonsense.
Yeah.
And I don't want to fire my prep guy, but like, I want to see technology move in that place. Like if we're all going to have to compete with the computer, I want the computer to at least make my job more enjoyable while it's trying to steal it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Nice. So that's what I'd like to see. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome.
You know, I think it'd be more fun.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Is there any current or recent projects that you can talk about that you want to?
I mixed a couple songs for an artist out of Singapore named Lullaboy. Some of my favorite songs, mixes, productions, like one of those combos where you're just like everything really came together.
Right.
There's a song called Cool and a song called I'm not going to remember the name of it, but everybody should go check out Lullaboy. Super, super talented guy.
Nice.
Just really, really great. I did a couple songs for him last year. That artist, Best Friend, that I mentioned before, I've been doing some stuff with them that will probably filter its way out. And then there's a couple other things that I've really been enjoying that I can't bring up. But and then I did a Christmas record last year that was a lot of fun. So
yeah.
So if you happen to be listening to this in December of 2024, check out Matt Rogers' Christmas record. He's a comedian and a podcaster.
Okay. Nice.
And it is so well produced and fucking hilarious. Like I was mixing and laughing. It was so
awesome.
Good. So that was a fun one.
Nice.
That's out.
Nice.
And so yeah, if you want to have a good laugh, check that out. It's really good.
Awesome.
It's good.
Awesome. So I like to wrap up each show with the same few questions for everyone.
Okay, let's do it.
First one is, who is your most influential teacher?
Yeah, I heard this one on your show and I was like really thinking about this. There's a lot of people that have inspired me a lot that I would never call a teacher,
right?
Or not even really call like a direct mentor.
That's fine. I mean,
you know,
that
but
totally works.
People that I've learned a lot from. I mentioned Francois Titaz. I did a few records with him. This artist Lo Fang is where I met him, and his approach to kind of helping an artist find what they are, I think was really amazing. He did Gautier and Kimbra, like early stuff for them.
Yeah.
And I think also, I mean, I almost feel like now that I look back on it, like I think that record came out 10 years ago. I think he was kind of doing the same thing for me as an engineer. Like he would let me run a little bit and then like pull me back. And I think he was like, oh, this kid can also explore his craft while I let the artist explore his. And so that record by Lo-Fan called Blue Film really shaped the way I think about making music. So I have to credit Francois. He's in Australia. Come back, Frank. Come back. And then Damian Taylor is a super talented producer, like just as like a thought like person to have a conversation with. He'll make you think about music or art, and really love having a conversation with Damian. And then everybody at Capitol, like you were working at East West, all those engineers that come through, even the grumpy ones, you know, you still like learn a lot of stuff watching people work.
Yeah.
Al Schmidt, I mean, I was, you know, honored to assist him a very small number of times when like Steve couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to get to see people like that work.
Yeah, definitely.
And just the way they hold themselves, nothing, you know, nothing, they're not afraid of anything. I mean, he'd been recording records for like 60, 70 years.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, people like that. And then surprisingly, the people would think this one's an odd one. My buddy Corey Britz, he was my studio partner, and he was like very music focused. He came from everything from a music perspective, and I came from everything from a technical perspective.
Right.
And when we started working together, I think we traded we rubbed off on each other. So when I'm thinking about a mix now, I'm thinking about like, how are the musicians going to hear this?
Right.
And on the other side, I think he's a lot more technical than he was when we first met. But
awesome.
But yeah, that's kind of my favorite music friends. There
Sweet.
we go.
Awesome. The next question is, what is your favorite reference track? If you have to go to a new studio, and I know not everyone even uses them anymore, but you know.
Yeah, this was another one I was thinking about. Stuff that I don't have any dedicated references. I also don't really leave my house.
Right.
I'm not a hermit, but you know, I just don't leave much. I have some stuff like when I was tuning this room, I think Billie Eilish records sound really amazing in like the juxtaposition of how something can be super dark and something else can be super bright.
Right.
There's a lot of like really detailed low end. I think those are great to listen to. There's a Justin Bieber song I love the vocal of, so if I'm like fighting a pop vocal, I'll pop that on.
Right.
I can't remember the name of the song.
Oh, good.
There's a Jeff Buckley track on that Sketches for My Sweetheart the Drunk, which was like the posthumous record, I think, that was like not finished.
Okay.
The song is, I think it's like Everything I Want. It's like track 2 or 3, if you pull it up. As like a bass line, like if you want to know what the low end feels like in a room, like if you're familiar with that,
right.
That's like my AC/DC Back in Black. I know a lot of people like use that because it's like what G and it's like a good room node. That's my like, I don't know this room. What's the bass guitar going to sound like? Because it's just like, it's just really good. Yeah, I mean, I listen to a lot of references maybe before I start working.
Right.
Like if somebody says they want to be, it's like a Taylor Swift vibe. Like I pop Taylor Swift on while I'm prepping or while I'm like doing my email in the morning. So I'll kind of like acquaint myself stylistically with things before I get into a mix, but I don't do a lot of A/B comparison while I'm working anymore.
All good.
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know.
Awesome.
That's how I roll.
Last question. What would be one tidbit for an upcoming engineer?
This one is always, there's so many things that I could put in here. I think there is a fine, and you can probably relate to this because you worked in a big studio. There is a fine balance between being the right person that you need to be in the room, particularly when you're an assistant, right? You're supposed to be like a little bit invisible,
right?
One step ahead, but that doesn't like really get you anywhere.
Right.
Like if you're a really amazing assistant, like if you're the best assistant, you're probably not going to be a huge engineer.
Right.
Because you are the best assistant.
Yes.
And so there's a fine line where you have to be an advocate for yourself. You have to somehow find a way to advance yourself when you're in a situation that can help you. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people to not be cocky, to not have an ego, but then also be the person that you're supposed to be in that space.
Right.
If you're the engineer, don't pipe up about lyric suggestions, but maybe you're having a conversation with the songwriter afterwards and you can find a way to do that. Like,
right.
it's a fine balance, but I think that is an art. And I think that's the difference between somebody that moves forward and gets stuck. I'm not going to say that you can't have a career,
right?
But you're going to feel stuck.
Yeah.
And until you figure out how to balance that line and help yourself, because nobody else is going to pull you up, right? Like nobody's going to be like, do the work. Nobody's going to put you in a position. You have to find a way to put yourself in that position. That's probably the thing I wish I would have known before I went back to Capitol for 6 years.
Right.
Because I was so focused on being really good at what I was doing to the point where there's a lot of sessions where nobody even knew my name. It was just like, man, that session went great. The engineer was great. See you later. Like, and that could have been an opportunity to work with that person in another studio. But yeah, I think that's a big one for people to kind of wrap your head around, but it's a tough one.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
This is great.
On the show.
This is fun.
Awesome.
Can't believe we have to stop.
Oh, good. Thanks for joining in today on Pro Audio Perspectives. Make sure to hit subscribe, and I'll see you next week.